And his experience was that, he went into some of these sweatshops, and like any Westerner would feel, sort of somewhat horrified by the conditions, but spent some time talking to the people working in those sweatshops who were actually viewed some of those jobs as being improvements over their alternatives, which were, say, farming in a fairly unfriendly environment to farm in, where they might be working even longer days or just as long days, but we're working outside and working in even more physical labor that was considered not just harder work, but lower status work in the locations that they were living in. And I think that we hate to see people have bad choices, but we need to recognize that, the choices that people face are the choices that they're making the best of the choices they have available to them. And if it wasn't benefiting these people's lives, they would be unwilling to work for those firms. They would rather go dig through the trash or farm in the farming or prostitute themselves, because those are their other options. And the fact that they're choosing to work in these factories reveals to us that it must be an improvement. It still sucks. Ideally, what would happen is one of the reasons people in these developing countries, and one of these reasons these developing countries are still developing, is because they don't have very good institutions. If you don't have, strong enforcement of private property or a decent rule of law acting in that country, it's hard to make investments. The reason they're not very productive workers is there's no capital for them to work with. They're working in sort of rudimentary factories, not the way if you looked at a car factory in the U.S., it's sort of fancy, right? You've seen the commercials with the robots, and that's not. If they had more capital to work with, they would be more productive. They could be paid more because they'd be producing more revenue for the firms. But nobody wants to invest capital in the firm in that country if there's no guarantee that that capital remains theirs, right? If you build a big factory, but you're worried that 5 years from now the government's going to turn around and take it away from you, or this big box firm in Venezuela that just had the government telling everyone go in and take everything off the shelves, they're pricing too high. That doesn't make me want to open a business in Venezuela, right? It particularly doesn't want me to spend a lot of money building a fancy factory so that the workers are really productive, because there's this fear that I've wasted my investment. We're very fortunate to live in the time we do and in the place we do. I mean, it's, even the poorest people in the U.S. are rich by developing world standards, right? I mean, it's quite extravagant, our lives is, compared to most of human history, right? But college students are quite willing to be cheap labor too, right? Yeah. I mean, most of my students, if I ask them if they're willing to take an unpaid internship, they are. Because they hope to gain skills, they hope to show employers that they know something, they hope to develop a reputation and improve their earnings later in life by having some job history. I think, it's the same thing in a developing country. You have to start somewhere, and it may be terrible that they're starting much lower than, even a high school dropout or someone with relatively low skills in the U.S. is starting, but they are where they are. You have to take them from where they are.
What I was doing, I guess, would be considered cheap labor. I was updating patients' charts as they came in weekly, monthly, and leaving them notes for what they needed to do in their charts to keep up with their schedule of their weight loss program. I did get to sit in on some group therapy sessions, but really I was just doing the dirty work. But I did end up getting a lot out of that. That was my first experience in the field, something to put on my resume. I got to network and meet new people in the field, alum in the field, and then it led to my independent study with Dr. Hackey that fall, doing research more on obesity and the National School Lunch Program and adolescent weight loss.
The AOP, the Annual Operations Plan or Project, and I did everything from kind of checking over the gifts that everyone received, so everyone who had an anniversary received a glass, so I did everything kind of just making sure those glasses were ordered correctly to when the glasses got here, checking to make sure that there were no breaks. There were plenty of breaks, and so one of the hardest things was, having to come up to your boss, and you're not getting paid for it, but you just have to be like, I'm sorry this broke, I promise it wasn't my fault. But what was so exciting about doing these kind of projects, and I would pick events. I picked restaurants for certain corporate people to meet at, which was incredibly exciting because they were places I never thought I'd be able to afford. Certainly, these men and women could definitely afford it, the kind of highwigs that were picking nice places in Vegas to go. We were at Mandalay Bay Hotel, and just kind of being able to be there, be part of that experience, and just work it was incredibly exciting for me. It was an opportunity I never would have gotten in my other summer job, which involved flipping burgers at a local spot along the highway of Connecticut.
I worked in the maternal and child health division of that, so I did a lot with newborn screening policy. Since Baby's First Test, which is a part of Genetic Alliance, is the national clearinghouse for information on newborn screening. So through that, I had a lot of great experience. I met a lot of great people who are really involved in policy making in DC, and I'm a health policy and management major, so it was kind of the ideal experience. Besides that, I got published in a parenting magazine. I wrote an article with my supervisor on newborn screening and the history of newborn screening and parent involvement and advocacy throughout those 50 years that newborn screening has been in existence. I'm still in contact with both of my supervisors, and they're very willing to help me. They've already written me recommendations for upcoming jobs.
And although I was there for 3 weeks and they joked when I arrived, like, what are you going to do here? Immediately, second day, I got thrown into this huge project that they're working on. Oliver Kahn, who's a famous German goalie, had commissioned Omanla EDU football to develop a manual that could be replicated and adapted around the world by different organizations that are working for nonviolence and youth life skills trainings. So I was working with a German friend of mine, Tim, who he at the time was translating into English, and then I would be translating his translation into a more proper English. And it was a great opportunity for me to be able to work on a professional such as Oliver Kahn's work, and to be able to adapt that, and also to really see what Omanla EU football is about, and also to be put in charge of a big project. Again, I was only there for 3 weeks, but they trusted me, and at the end, I remember them asking me if I could come back and if I could stay, and I really wanted to. It was a great experience, and they said that if I do want to go back there, I could definitely get a job. I think internships are a great way of being able to show your own skills in a very comfortable setting. Again, they're not paying you, so there's not as much pressure, which if you do perform, it really shows that you're working and you're performing on a level that you're not even getting paid for. So if you're performing at that level, they're going to want you back.
Economics that suggests that Walmart has been one of the biggest poverty alleviating programs in the U.S. Because one of the things it's done is make healthy food, inexpensive clothing, and other sort of basic necessities of life really affordable for low-income families. So, I mean, do I need another cheap shirt from Walmart? Probably not. It means I have to do laundry a little less likely, but a little less often. But other people, it makes a difference between whether their kid has a coat to wear to school or not. I mean, it's not a terrible thing to have cheap stuff, right?